Sheriffs, the police, or nothing.
They got to go today. Well,
Sir, you cannot.
they can record all they want.
So you need to go consult a lawyer.
They can record all they want. They getting out today.
Right, you hear that, Miss Buddy, right? So you need to get a report. Wait for the police to come.
Okay.
Okay, you can give me a call then.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nah, we got to start packing stuff up today, man.
On September 15th, 2025, law enforcement in Wilson, North Carolina, responded to a shooting that left 2 people dead and another injured. The victims were identified as 44-year-old Natasha Sutton and her 21-year-old son, Avani Pender. The suspect was Dante Maurice Chestnut, a local landlord and nonprofit founder known for his work in the community. His wife, Tiffany Monique Chestnut, was later charged as an accessory and accused of destroying evidence.
A man accused of double murder now faces a new charge. Wilson police added a second charge for attempted murder for Dante Chestnut, as he accused of shooting 4 people yesterday.
And tonight we are learning more about the victims. This is Natasha Sutton and her son, Avani Pender. They were killed. WRAL's Heidi Kirk spoke with their family this afternoon. Heidi, their family really wants answers.
Well, Lena, the big question that their family members who we spoke with today is why would someone shoot and kill their loved ones? And that's a question that Wilson police officers here at the department in downtown Wilson have been looking into over the last 2 days. But at this point, we still don't know what the motive was. And of course, this is something that the family would really like to know.
The case raised questions about leadership, accountability, and how private disputes can turn into public tragedies. What began as a landlord-tenant conflict developed into a double homicide investigation that continues to move through the courts. The story is not only about the crime itself, but about the impact on family, community, and the unraveling of a public figure's reputation. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now let's begin. Natasha Latrice Sutton was a lifelong resident of Wilson, North Carolina. At 44 years old, she had lived most of her life in the same community, where she eventually lost her life. She was known locally as a mother who prioritized her family above everything else. Those who knew her describe her as someone whose daily life revolved around her children and her role as a provider. She was deeply embedded in her family network and rarely made decisions without considering how they would affect her children. Family members consistently described Natasha as protective, outspoken, and strong-willed. She was not a person who avoided confrontation when it came to defending her children. Relatives and acquaintances noted that she could be firm when necessary, especially in situations where she believed her family's safety or stability was being threatened. At the same time, her protective nature was viewed as a reflection of her responsibility to maintain her household. Natasha was regarded as a stabilizing presence in her family, often placing her children's needs above her own. At the time of her death, Natasha was managing her family's household under difficult economic circumstances. Like many families in Wilson, she faced challenges in maintaining housing stability. Financial struggles reportedly played a role in her living arrangements, and her inability to consistently meet rent obligations created tension between her and her landlord, Dante Maurice Chestnut. The relationship between Sutton and Chestnut had become strained in the weeks before the shooting, centered largely around unpaid rent and eviction threats. Chestnut, who owned the property, reportedly insisted that Sutton and her family leave immediately. Natasha resisted these demands, claiming that eviction could not be carried out without a legal process. This dispute became the foundation of the conflict that eventually led to her death. Avani Pender was 21 years old at the time of his death. Born and raised in Wilson, He was a young man beginning to navigate the transition into adulthood. Friends described him as funny and energetic, traits that made him well-liked among his peers. His closeness to his mother was notable, as those who knew him said he often relied on her not only for stability, but also for direction in his early adult life. At 21, Avanti was still in the process of shaping his future. He was exploring opportunities in education, work, and other avenues that might provide him with long-term stability. According to relatives, he had dreams of building a better life for himself, but was still taking steps toward realizing them. His youth meant his future was largely unwritten, and he had not yet committed to a single career or path forward. Avanti's loyalty to his family, and especially to his mother, was frequently mentioned by those who knew him. He shared a close relationship with Natasha, and his protective instincts toward her were evident. Relatives and friends noted that he was supportive, often standing alongside her in disputes. His death at 21 was not only a loss of life, but also the loss of a future that had only just begun to unfold. The accused shooter, Dante Maurice Chestnut, was 39 years old and widely known in Wilson. He was a founder of a nonprofit organization called Our Wilson, which focused on mentoring youth, discouraging gun violence, and promoting community peace. Chestnut presented himself as a figure of leadership, someone dedicated to improving the city. His work through the nonprofit gained him recognition, and in 2023, he ran for city council, further cementing his status as a public figure. His public persona was that of a man determined to reduce violence and help the next generation of Wilson residents find a better path. Outside of his community work, Chestnut was a landlord with multiple properties, including the residence where Natasha Sutton and her family lived. Reports from tenants and neighbors indicated that his relationships with renters were often strained. He was described as controlling in matters involving rent and property management. In the case of Sutton and Pender, multiple disputes had taken place regarding unpaid rent. In the days leading up to the shooting, video recordings and neighbor accounts suggested that Chestnut displayed increasingly confrontational behavior. The stark difference between Chestnut's public and private lives became a focal point of the case. While publicly promoting peace and urging youth to reject violence, Chestnut was accused of carrying out a violent act himself. His role as a community leader and mentor stood in direct contradiction to the charges of first-degree murder. This contrast raised questions about his authenticity, whether his public image was genuine or whether it served as a cover for a more aggressive and domineering private nature. The central issue leading to the shooting was a dispute over unpaid rent. Reports indicate that Sutton had fallen behind on payments, and Chestnut, as landlord, demanded that she and her family vacate the premises immediately. Sutton resisted, insisting that eviction could not be carried out without legal documentation and a court process. This refusal created significant friction between the two. In the days prior to the shooting, Chestnut was recorded in video evidence saying, "They gotta go today, they're getting out today." This statement demonstrated his intent to remove Sutton and her family without going through the courts. The situation escalated further as Natasha reportedly refused to leave, insisting that she and her family had rights under the law. The standoff created an environment of mounting tension, with both parties unwilling to yield. Neighbors reported seeing multiple confrontations between Sutton and Chestnut during this period. These confrontations were often loud and visible to others on the street. Several witnesses noted that Natasha appeared to feel threatened but stood her ground because she believed she was being treated unfairly. Witnesses also confirmed that Avanti was frequently present during these disputes, supporting his mother as the conflict with the landlord intensified. On the morning of September 15, 2025, the landlord-tenant conflict between Dante Maurice Chestnut and his tenants at a Washington Street property in Wilson, North Carolina, escalated into direct confrontation. According to witness accounts, Chestnut arrived at the property earlier in the day to demand that the tenants vacate immediately. Neighbors reported that voices were raised during the interaction. Natasha Sutton, age 44, and her son, 21-year-old Avanti Pender, were among those present. The dispute centered on unpaid rent and the landlord's insistence that the family move out without further delay. Chestnut allegedly approached Sutton with an ultimatum. The family had to leave the residence that same day. His presence was described as forceful, and according to later recovered video footage, he emphasized that they gotta go today. The confrontation ended without violence in the morning hours, but tension was evident. By early afternoon, Chestnut returned to the same location. This time, his demeanor was described as more agitated than during the morning encounter. Multiple witnesses stated that the argument quickly reignited. Sutton continued to resist a demand for immediate eviction, arguing that she and her family had the right to remain in the home until proper legal steps were followed. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices and profanity exchanged between both parties. At approximately 2 p.m., the dispute escalated further and spilled outside the property. Several individuals were present, including Sutton, her son Pender, 37-year-old Tiffany Fogg, and Sutton's relative Tyron Sutton. The confrontation drew attention from bystanders and neighbors, some of whom began recording portions of the encounter on their phones. Cell phone video captured a heated verbal exchange between Chestnut and Sutton. In the footage, Chestnut is seen gesturing and repeating his demand that the family leave immediately. Sutton responds defiantly, standing her ground. The video also records a moment of high tension where voices are raised and physical proximity between the landlord and the tenants becomes confrontational. At a critical moment during the standoff, Chestnut allegedly reached for a firearm. Witnesses confirmed that the weapon was produced during the ongoing argument. The exact sequence of seconds leading to the first shot remains central to the investigation, but the escalation from verbal threats to armed violence was immediate. The first shots were fired at close range. Natasha Sutton was struck, collapsing at the scene. Her son, Avani Pender, attempted to intervene, either to shield his mother or to stop the confrontation, and he too was shot. Tiffany Fogg was hit by gunfire in the chaos, sustaining non-life-threatening injuries. Tyron Sutton was also struck but survived. Multiple witnesses described a rapid series of shots, leaving no time for the victims to escape. The sound of gunfire triggered immediate panic throughout the neighborhood. Residents screamed, ran for cover, and some continued recording the aftermath on their phones. As Sutton and Pender lay critically injured on the ground, chaos surrounded the property. Neighbors shouted for help while others dialed 911. Within minutes, law enforcement and emergency medical personnel were dispatched to the location. Some bystanders continued recording, capturing the moments immediately after the shooting. These clips later became key evidence, showing the victims on the ground and the community's frantic reaction. Police officers arrived within minutes of the emergency calls. Upon arrival, they secured the area, disarmed the suspect, and attempted to stabilize the scene. Emergency medical personnel confirmed that Natasha Sutton and her son Avani Pender were deceased at the scene. Both had suffered fatal gunshot wounds. Survivors, including Tiffany Fogg and Tyron Sutton, were transported to Wilson Medical Center with injuries described as non-life-threatening. At the scene, investigators collected multiple pieces of physical evidence. The firearm allegedly used by Chestnut was recovered. Shell casings and bullet fragments were gathered and marked for forensic testing. Witness cell phone recordings provided partial video documentation of the confrontation and aftermath. Statements were taken from multiple neighbors who had observed the shooting unfold. Chestnut was taken into custody at the scene without major incident. He was immediately booked on 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Sutton and Pender, and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder for the shooting of survivors. His arrest shocked the community, as his public role as a nonprofit leader and anti-violence advocate contrasted sharply with the violent events of the day. Investigators uncovered that Chestnut had recorded portions of the dispute on social media before and after shooting. Some of these videos had been deleted shortly after the incident, raising questions of possible evidence tampering. Screenshots and partial copies retrieved by witnesses confirmed his statements demanding eviction on the day of a shooting. Further investigation led to the arrest of Tiffany Monique Chestnut, related to the suspect, on charges of accessory after the fact of first-degree murder and destroying or altering evidence. Authorities allege she attempted to interfere with digital evidence linked to the shooting. Autopsies performed on Natasha Sutton and Avani Pender confirmed death by multiple gunshot wounds. The ballistic examination of the recovered firearm and shell casings linked the weapon directly to Chestnut. Trajectory analysis indicated that Sutton was shot at close range, consistent with eyewitness testimony. Survivors and neighbors provided consistent accounts of the suspect's aggressive behavior leading up to the shooting. Witnesses recalled him repeating demands that the tenants leave immediately and displaying increasing anger throughout the day. Several confirmed that Sutton attempted to argue for her right to remain in the home, while Pender tried to defend his mother. Eyewitnesses also described the panic following the shots. Community members running for cover, shouting, and recording the aftermath. Their statements reinforced the timeline that the escalation from argument to gunfire occurred within minutes. The immediate response in Wilson, North Carolina, was one of confusion and disbelief. Residents struggled to reconcile the image of Dante Maurice Chestnut, a man who had publicly built his reputation as a mentor and anti-violence advocate, with the accusations of double homicide. For years, Chestnut was known in the city for founding R. Wilson, a nonprofit dedicated to mentoring young people and reducing crime in the community. He had spoken at schools, churches, and local government events about ending cycles of violence. The same individual, now in custody, stood accused of fatally shooting 44-year-old Natasha Sutton and her 21-year-old son, Avani Pender, in a dispute tied to housing and eviction. The contrast between Chestnut's public image and the allegations raised questions that rippled through the community. Some residents described a sense of betrayal, noting that a figure who spoke out against violence had himself become the subject of a violent act. The abrupt shift in perception created unease. If a man trusted to guide youth away from crime could be charged with such acts, then how stable were the foundations of leadership and mentorship in the community? The relatives of Natasha Sutton and Avani Pender took their loss into the public space almost immediately after the incident. Family members expressed devastation over the deaths, holding press conferences, speaking to reporters, and organizing gatherings in their memory. Their remarks focused on the sudden and violent nature of the deaths and on the impact this loss had on the family structure. Community members organized vigils at the location of the shooting and in nearby public areas. Candlelight events brought crowds together as people lit candles, shared stories, and read scripture. Social media platforms carried numerous tributes to Natasha and Avani. Their names and images circulated widely on Facebook, Instagram, and local news comment sections. Many posts emphasized their family roles and the fact that their lives had been cut short. As the case developed, the community did not present a single unified perspective on the suspect. On one side, supporters of Chestnut pointed to his track record in Wilson. They described his nonprofit work as life-changing for young people and insisted that one incident should not erase years of advocacy. Some suggested that the shooting may have involved circumstances not yet made public, leaving room for explanations beyond what the arrest records indicated. On the other side, residents argued that Chestnut's actions spoke louder than his past words. They insisted that the shooting revealed a darker side to his personality, one that had been hidden behind his nonprofit work and political activity. For them, the case demonstrated how public figures could mask troubling behavior behind positive community projects. The division highlighted how reputation, public work, and criminal allegations can clash in ways that leave communities fractured and uncertain about whom to trust. Following his arrest, Dante Maurice Chestnut was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Natasha Sutton and Avani Pender. He was also charged with 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, connected to the injuries sustained by another victim during the same shooting. In addition, investigators brought charges against Tiffany Monique Chestnut, a relative of the suspect, for accessory after the fact and for altering or destroying evidence. This indicated law enforcement believed she had interfered with the investigation by tampering with digital content or other materials connected to the case. Chestnut's initial court appearance involved a formal reading of charges and a discussion of potential bond. Prosecutors argued that the severity of the allegations, combined with evidence of premeditation, made him a danger to the community and ineligible for release. The prosecution emphasized that there was recorded evidence of Chestnut stating that his tenants had to leave today, which suggested planning and intent. They argued this statement, combined with the confrontation and subsequent shooting, established grounds for first-degree murder. The defense offered early suggestions that the confrontation may have escalated unexpectedly. They hinted at the possibility of arguing self-defense or provocation, though details of this argument remained unclear. Their position was that all available facts needed to be examined before conclusions could be drawn about intent. The case against Chestnut relied heavily on multiple forms of evidence. Video recordings, some were made before and during the confrontation, including statements about eviction. Others were allegedly deleted after the incident, which became central to the accessory charges. Witness testimony. Survivors of the shooting and neighbors were expected to testify about what they saw and heard. Forensic reports, ballistic analysis, autopsy results, and crime scene reconstruction would establish the sequence of shots and confirm the weapon's connection to Chestnut. Digital content. Deleted videos and social media evidence became a major focus as investigators worked to recover what had been erased. The trial was expected to attract heavy media coverage due to Chestnut's high-profile community role. Local and regional outlets emphasized the irony of an anti-violence advocate facing homicide charges. Court hearings drew attention from Wilson residents, journalists, and nonprofit leaders who had previously supported Chestnut's work. Public interest in the case ensured that each development, from hearings to evidence releases, was widely reported and closely scrutinized. The dispute that preceded the shooting drew attention to broader issues of landlord-tenant relations and housing insecurity. Reports suggested that Sutton and her family face eviction pressures without clear evidence of legal process. This raised questions about how housing disputes escalate, particularly when landlords take unilateral action without formal court orders. The incident highlighted the vulnerabilities of tenants and the potential dangers when housing conflicts turn personal rather than being resolved through legal systems. The contrast between Chestnut's nonprofit work and the allegations of murder became a dominant theme in media coverage. Analysts questioned how someone celebrated for opposing violence could simultaneously be accused of enacting it. The case underscored the difficulty of fully knowing public figures and the risks of assuming that positive community work automatically reflects private character. The case also raised questions about trust. Communities often place faith in mentors, leaders, and advocates who appear committed to social change. The accusations against Chestnut challenged the stability of that trust. For some residents, it created a sense of disillusionment about whether anyone in positions of influence could be relied upon. This had implications not only for Chestnut's nonprofit, which collapsed under the weight of the allegations, but also for other organizations in the area trying to maintain credibility. Several unanswered questions persisted even as the legal process moved forward. Were eviction papers ever served legally? Reports suggested Chestnut acted independently, but confirmation of legal filings remained unclear. What was in the deleted videos? Investigators confirmed some recordings were removed, but the full content and intent of those videos had not been disclosed. Was this dispute purely about rent, or did personal animosity play a role? Neighbors speculated about tensions that extended beyond finances, but details were unverified. Could the outcome have been prevented? Some questioned whether earlier intervention from courts, social services, or mediation could have avoided the confrontation entirely. The deaths of Natasha Latrice Sutton, age 44, and her son Avani Pender, age 21, did not end with the crime scene on Washington Street. Their loss produced consequences that extended far beyond the immediate incident, shaping the lives of their surviving family members, altering the fabric of the Wilson community, and forcing questions about leadership, accountability, and public trust. When Sutton and Pender were pronounced dead at the scene on September 15, 2025, the burden of survival fell on their relatives. Tyron Sutton, who was injured during the shooting, faced recovery while also processing the loss of his partner and stepson. The extended family members, including siblings, cousins, and grandparents, were left to assume responsibilities that had been central to Natasha's role in the household. Funeral arrangements became the first practical challenge. Relatives organized services under the pressure of public attention, financial demands, and the weight of sudden bereavement. In small communities like Wilson, the expense of burial, memorials, and related costs often creates financial strain. This strain was magnified by the fact that Natasha was a primary caretaker and provider for her family. Without her, the structure of financial stability was dismantled. Avani's death created another layer of generational trauma. At 21, he represented the continuation of family legacy. His absence removed not only a son and brother, but a potential for a future generation that would carry the family name forward. The intergenerational consequences of losing both a mother and her son in a single event left relatives with a permanent gap. Survivors were left with responsibilities that had no clear replacement: childcare, financial income, and the simple continuity of family traditions. In this case, trauma was not limited to immediate grief. It extended into practical decisions. Guardianship of children or younger dependents had to be arranged. Housing and financial obligations had to be reassessed. Surviving relatives had to navigate these shifts while also preparing to participate in legal proceedings as witnesses, supporters of the prosecution, or sources of public statements. The ripple effect ensured that Sutton and Pender's absence continued to shape the family long after crime. The Wilson community faced a separate but equally significant aftermath. The accused, Dante Maurice Chestnut, had been widely known for his nonprofit work through R. Wilson, an organization designed to mentor young people and reduce community violence. His arrest for 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder produced a sharp rupture in community trust. R. Wilson collapsed in the weeks following the crime. Members, volunteers, and youth connected to the organization withdrew, leaving unfinished programs and abandoned commitments. The nonprofit had served as a public platform for Chestnut, allowing him to appear as a reformer and civic figure. Its dissolution left a void in youth engagement services in Wilson, particularly for those who had relied on mentorship programs. The disillusionment ran deeper than the loss of a nonprofit. Community members began to question how leaders are vetted and how much trust should be placed in public figures. Chestnut's reputation as an anti-violence advocate conflicted directly with the allegations against him. Residents began examining whether warning signs had been ignored. Questions surfaced. Were his leadership roles properly scrutinized? Did his dual status as landlord and community leader give him unchecked authority? Did political ambition shield him from accountability until the crime forced exposure? Church leaders, educators, and civic officials were drawn into these conversations. For some, the case demonstrated the vulnerability of communities that rely heavily on charismatic figures without institutional oversight. For others, it highlighted the difficulty of reconciling positive public work with private misconduct. Regardless of perspective, the community's trust in leadership structures suffered measurable damage. In the weeks following the shooting, public focus shifted to preserving the memory of Natasha and Avani. Vigils were organized on Washington Street, where candles, photographs, and handwritten messages marked the site of their deaths. Social media tributes circulated, emphasizing not only the tragedy of their loss, but also the desire to remember them as individuals beyond the headlines. Local churches and civic groups hosted memorial services. Family members delivered statements underscoring Natasha's role as a devoted mother and Avani's identity as a young man with aspirations. These tributes were crucial in reframing the narrative. Instead of being remembered solely as victims of a landlord dispute, they were acknowledged as members of family and neighborhood and city. Calls to action emerged from these memorials. Some demanded reforms in landlord-tenant laws to prevent similar disputes from escalating. Others insisted on greater accountability for community leaders, ensuring that mentorship programs, nonprofits, and civic organizations undergo proper checks. Natasha and Avani's legacy became tied not only to remembrance, but also to advocacy for structural change. Their names were spoken at council meetings, vigils, and marches. For many in Wilson, the legacy of Sutton and Pender lies in ensuring that their deaths prompt reforms that prevent future tragedies. The case of Natasha Sutton and Avani Pender remains active in the legal system. As of late 2025, Dante Maurice Chestnut awaits trial on charges of first-degree murder and attempted murder. Tiffany Monique Chestnut faces charges of accessory after the fact and destroying evidence. Both cases are pending, with legal arguments expected to draw significant media coverage. The legal process will determine the outcome for Chestnut. The trial will center on evidence such as video recordings, ballistic analysis, witness testimony, and deleted social media content. The prosecution aims to demonstrate premeditation, while the defense is likely to argue self-defense, provocation, or dispute over intent. Until a verdict is reached, the community remains in a state of unresolved tension. Wilson continues to grapple with the duality of its fallen leader. On one hand, Chestnut's contributions through R. Wilson cannot be erased. On the other, the charges against him reveal a stark contrast between public advocacy and private violence. This duality leaves the city divided between those who mourn the betrayal of trust and those who focus solely on the loss of innocent lives. The reflection is straightforward. Two ordinary lives, a 44-year-old mother and her 21-year-old son, were cut short in extraordinary violence. Their absence reshaped a family, disrupted a community, and dismantled a public figure's reputation. The events highlight how personal disputes can escalate into public tragedies, how unchecked authority can destroy trust, and how ordinary people often pay the highest cost. The final note is clear. Justice in this case must speak not only for Natasha Sutton and Avani Pender, but also for the truth hidden behind public respectability. It must uncover how a man celebrated as a mentor and community leader became the accused in a double homicide, and it must ensure that the victims' names are not lost in the shadow of his reputation. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.